sometimes when your things are easy, you don't think people should pay you for them. So, I would be like, oh, it's actually really easy for me to sit down with someone and guide them through a meditation. I had, there's so many students on my course who really found that difficult. And I thought, this is really easy. It's like having a conversation with someone and supporting their mental mindset and, empowering them. People shouldn't be paying me for this because it feels like fun, Yeah, and I thought, well, no, that's my skill set. That's my skill set, So I was like, oh, I see it now. I see that as my skill set, right? So I think that's important as well, is that we have actually a lot of expertise that we don't label expertise. But when you look at it for what it is, it's expertise. And you don't have to have done it for 10 years. So I was like, okay, cool. Someone else has tried to do this for 10 years and hasn't been as good. This is my thing.
Welcome to another episode of Big Risk Energy. On this podcast, we talk to an amazing range of people. And we talk to these people about risk. Risk they've taken in their lives, risk they've taken in their careers, when they paid off, and when they didn't. And on this week's episode, I'm blessed to be joined by the one and only Katie Mantwa-George. Katie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's so good to be here. I love hearing my whole name, actually, funnily enough. It feels quite long when you say it, you hear it from somebody else, but it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, amazing. So Katie, you are an author, you're a certified meditation teacher and a corporate empathy speaker, which is a bunch of really, really interesting concepts that probably a lot of people don't necessarily grasp on the face of it. I'd love to start with meditation. Such a privilege for us to have a certified teacher with us today. How do you explain the benefits of meditation to someone who has never tried it?
Yeah, well, gosh, there are so many. But I suppose that one of the first things to mention about meditation is that what you're really doing is shifting your focus and your awareness from one thing to another thing. So that is basically, at a basic level, what's happening. So if you have a super busy mind and you have lots of ideas or you're thinking about too many things, the point of meditation is to give you an anchor to move your awareness away from that onto something else. So your body and your biology and your mind is never going to be able to stop thinking. Mm-hmm. So you'll see there are some practices where the idea is that you would stop thinking and there's going to be silence, and that can actually create more stress because that's not possible. It's not possible to stop thinking. What you need to do is replace those thoughts with something else. And there are different types of meditation that can support you to move that awareness or to replace a new thought in place of the other ones. So essentially that's it. So much more I could say, but I'm going to stop there for now.
No, love it. I think it's an amazing explanation. Of course, would expect nothing less. One of the really interesting things for me, as you said, is challenge anyone to spend 5 seconds without thinking. It's basically impossible. And I think it does cause a lot of people a lot of stress when they start out meditating and they're like, I cannot stop thinking. And I think it takes a while to build that realization that that's not the goal, is to stop the thoughts.
Yes.
The thoughts will always be there. And I can't remember where I heard this. I was doing some guided meditation and they were describing the contents of consciousness as being, everything we experience at all the time. But our attention is like a spotlight, right? We have control over this spotlight and we can put it on different things if we train our mind. So a bit of maybe a philosophical question for you is, do thoughts run all the time, but actually when we're just putting our attention somewhere else, we're not hearing them? Or do you think thoughts ever do stop?
So, yeah, I mean, it could get quite philosophical at this point. Thoughts, I don't believe, stop. Your consciousness is an ongoing, ever-existing being in itself almost. In fact, almost, we are conscious beings, right? So depending on what you believe and how you see life after death or before death or, reincarnation, consciousness is the thing that really drives us and where existence is. And so obviously we're not 100% sure where consciousness sits, whether it's actually in the biological brain or whether it's spirit or soul or whatever that might be. But it is always there. So when we're sleeping, we have these different states of consciousness that we can be in. When you're not aware of yourself being there because you're sleeping, are you still there? Right? You're obviously still there because you're still lying in your bed and you are still Roei or Katie. But actually you're not aware of your consciousness or your thoughts or what's going on, but it doesn't mean you don't exist, right? So there's lots of debate around that. Or when you're here, what really exists for us right now is this moment and this conversation. We don't know what's happening on the street, outside, or at home, or anywhere else. So it's almost like nothing else exists just because we are not aware of it. So it's always there. Thoughts are always there. Consciousness is always there. We're just not aware of all of it at the same time.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Thank you so much for that explanation as well. And I think for me, one of the amazing things about meditation in that context, and would love to understand how you've approached this, is if our reality is based on our consciousness and the contents of our consciousness, our ability to control the contents of our consciousness allows us to shape our own reality. And I think when that comes to ideas of empowerment and ideas of taking back control of our lives, of our thoughts, being able to act in different situations, I think it's a real cheat code for life, meditation. Yeah. So where do you see meditation and empowerment and taking back control coming together?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it is how you perceive the world. So we often, when we want to do things or make big changes or take risks, we're often worried about what other people might think, for example. So we don't do it because your parents might think it's a bad idea or your friends might think you're silly. All this very natural to feel that way. But if you were to switch your perception to how you choose to perceive things, then you feel a lot braver to actually take the action because you're more in touch with what you actually want to do and who you actually are and decisions that you want to make. That supports you to move forwards more confidently versus the extra energy and effort of what are people going to think. So I think that is part of most societies globally in the world, worrying about others, and meditation supports you to actually bring your awareness into yourself to be able to make clearer and better informed decisions about what you want to do. But that also supports the people around you, because if you're operating in a way that's very true to yourself, people replicate that, and that becomes behavior that mimics without you having to encourage or persuade other people to do the same or to find their own path. So that idea of perception is very powerful, and meditation supports you to perceive situations in a way that is supportive of you and your growth and your development. So I would say perception for sure. And when you're looking at situations from more of a bird's eye point of view versus from your conditioning, then you make better informed decisions. So we are pretty much every action that we take is based on our memories and our experiences, right? So that's when a lot of people talk about karma, for example, that's kind of the concept that comes from the ancient Vedic traditions. So you're not making informed decisions most of the time. You're making decisions that are based on experiences you've had or what people have told you. So meditation supports you to be able to very obviously rapidly and without thinking, zoom out of the situation and look at it for exactly what it is, and then have your response or make your decision. So you're not having that kind of toxicity of your conditioning that is making decisions, big decisions sometimes.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I love how you put that. And I think there, at least in my experience, and I think one of the things you've already mentioned is we have to be careful about trying to put the meditation experience into a box, because ultimately people will seek different things from it and achieve different things from it and want to use it to different ends. Yep. But for me, especially in a high stress job such as being a founder, meditation has allowed me to achieve a type of freedom from suffering, pain and stress that nothing else in the world has allowed me to have. Because when you're spending so much of your life in your head, tied up in these thoughts and going around these circles and all the things that we feel when we're stressed, having that circuit breaker there, which actually gives you freedom from realizing how much suffering we place on ourselves in our thoughts and how little of it actually happens in the contents of consciousness outside of our thoughts. For me, it's felt like real freedom.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I love the way you've put that, and you obviously have a good understanding of how meditation supports you.
Trying to, but it's one of them, yeah. Right? The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, right?
Well, absolutely. And actually, the more you practice, so, the more you look into something and you're curious about something and you explore it, then you start to feel the benefits. And I think, one of the magic things about meditation that you may have noticed through your own practice is that it's not that it's necessarily always wonderful during the practice, right? It's going to be difficult some days and easier some days, but it's more about what happens after and outside of the practice.
Yes.
So when you meditate regularly, you start to notice that when you don't, the day is just not as smooth. You're not as focused, things are not seen as clearly, or you're not as blissful or joyful, right? So that is part of your continuation of the practice is understanding and thinking, gosh, actually, this is not just for this moment. It's not just for these 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It's for the magic that happens outside of that. It's for the magic that happens in your biology and your brain and things that change and shift. So that keeps you going, right? When you experience that bliss is what it's often called, those moments of bliss that meditation can support.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's it. I think the end goal of meditation, for me anyway, is actually where there stops being a line between active practicing and living the rest of life,
Yes.
right? It's trying to become integrated.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the biggest kind of, I suppose, misconceptions with meditation is absolutely a great stress relief mechanism or practice or whatever to kind of have a peaceful, harmonious life. But what normally happens is that people will start meditating when they're feeling stressed. So they'll do their meditation when they're stressed, and then they'll stop when they're feeling better. And so meditation becomes attached to that feeling of stress. And so that can also put people off from continuing their practice. So subconsciously, they're associating the two things together, right? Which is not where we want to be. So if you practice meditation all the time, regardless of how stressed you are or how upset you are, you use it in the happy days, the bad days, then it becomes a part of your existence, right? It's not associated with negativity. And then also this association with stress is good because it certainly supports you being able to sleep better and be less stressed and more harmonious. But actually, meditation also supports your expansion in terms of your creativity and your innovation, your ability to think of new ideas and have that braveness to actually jump on board them. And people don't see meditation as a tool for that necessarily. They don't see it as this kind of expansive practice. They see it as this fix to a problem, which is what we're used to in societies. Oh, okay, I'll meditate when I'm stressed, or I'll take the tablet when I'm ill. But actually, no, meditate to support your blossoming and flourishing of your ideas and of you becoming yourself and being yourself is a really good reason to meditate.
I love it. And it's so interesting you say that. I never put two and two together on that. But now that you say it, and sometimes it takes that, it's so clear to me. Because when I started meditating, similar sort of time to you, about 6 years ago, I came into it through an app called Headspace, which I'm sure you've come across. And to be honest, I think, when you get further into your practice, maybe Headspace is not necessarily as useful as it is at the start, but for me was the most accessible way for me to get into it, which was really, really valuable. And I think that's what it's about. But you used to have these meditation streaks, and I'd get so stressed about losing my streak and feel like such a pressure. And
I remember that.
It started almost having like a negative connotation. So yeah, I think you're 100% right. And for me, one of the things that I don't think was necessarily appreciated even 6-7 years ago, I mean, I'm sure it was, but maybe not in the mainstream in the way that it is now, is actually the neurological impacts of and the way that it causes neuroplasticity and new pathways in the mind. And I think that's when you're in the corporate environment, do people start appreciating that element and see the real practical scientific rather than the let's call it spiritual elements of meditation?
Yeah, definitely. With corporate clients, it's not about the spiritual connection, even though we know that's what's going to happen anyway. Like, it's like we'll come in with the data and the science, but really you're becoming a spiritual being. A bit sneaky. No, but yes, you go in with the data, and it is scientifically proven, luckily. So it's actually you've got great research and tools to be able to take it into the corporate space. I mean, from the perspective of people being happier. And people being more innovative and creative, organizations actually really want that, clearly. If you're a game-changing tech company and you want people to come up with new ideas, then meditation is one of your tools. So that's very attractive. Obviously, with the science around kind of neuroplasticity, it's absolutely true. And we've also got, in the workplace, a lot of stress is created by how people behave with each other and how they react to stressful situations in meetings or with clients, in debates about strategy, for example. What we really want to be able to do in those situations is stay calm and respond to each other versus react to each other.
Yes.
Right? So meditation is the number one tool for you to respond versus react. And the workplace is one place where we're reacting almost all the time and we're not even aware of it. So organizations are very happy with that. And when you meditate, you have a thing called the amygdala in the kind of the front of your mind, and it's a certain size, and it's quite big. Usually, for prehistoric reasons, that we were obviously in danger a lot more when we were cave people. But we're not cave people anymore, and luckily we're in a society where we don't have real dangers all the time, but we do have small dangers. But anyway, when you meditate, your amygdala actually reduces in size.
Interesting.
So physically reduced in size, and a smaller amygdala relates to you being able to respond more effectively and more calmly.
Right, because like fight and flight.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Right. So you don't have to meditate for the intention or the purpose of being a calmer person, but if you just do the meditation, your body will react to it. Your amygdala will start to shrink, and you will naturally become a calmer, better responsive person.
Wow.
So you don't have to have the intention or the end goal. Your body is actually doing the work for you. So once you know that, you're maybe more likely to meditate because it is an effortless activity that genuinely changes your biology.
Wow.
So yeah, pretty magical, really.
Incredible. And it's so interesting you say that. And I'm so glad that you gave me that answer, because I didn't know that element of the impact on the brain. But something that I've been realizing myself is, obviously, you know, our consciousness has developed over time based on our need for survival.
Yes.
Hunting, gathering, whatever it might be, all the physical threats that we don't have now to the same extent. And I've felt since I started meditating that parts of consciousness got almost muted in order to allow for that fight or flight mechanism, right? In order to allow for us to be our, most physically aware, physically active versions of ourselves. But I think there is that opportunity, and I've certainly felt within myself over this time, and loads of other people I've spoken to, the same, is almost these other parts of consciousness which may have, started to evolve out, are coming back. Things like gratitude, compassion, which don't help us survive in a fight over resources, but are much more applicable now.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you think about, there are. So when I teach students, obviously I teach a type of transcendental meditation.
Oh wow!
As well, yeah. So it's called primordial sound meditation, but.
Okay.
It's, the intention is not to reach higher states of consciousness, but that's absolutely what can happen. So it's really tapping into these other states of consciousness that we're not really aware of. And it will, manifest itself in this state of bliss that opens up these opportunities or gaps towards finding what your true self is, or finding the additional magic that you're able to create in your daily life. So I would definitely say that when I was switching from corporate to being brave enough to go into my own business.
Because I wanted to ask you about this risk, of course.
Yeah. Meditation was my primary tool, and I didn't know that's what it was at the time. It was actually more of a stress management tool. But as I meditated more and more and kind of went into more of the transcendental meditation, I started realizing that there were parts of me that I just literally had not noticed before and hadn't seen before. There were skills I had that I hadn't recognized. There were desires that I had that were just not there before in terms of what I actually wanted to do with my life. So there was an opening and an awareness of who I truly was that was maybe would never have been available to me if I hadn't, taken the practice maybe a little bit more seriously. And I just started seeing more opportunities and attracting the people who could support me to have them, and attracting, the training and the courage and all of that. So it was certainly something that helped me to literally just open up my mind to what the possibilities could be and are.
Wow, amazing. And I think that's, one of the things that I hear from so many guests that we've had on the podcast is when they're taking those big risks, the anxiety, the stress, these are the things that stop them maybe taking the risk earlier or made them pull back on these risks. So for you, meditation was key to seeing the thoughts for what they were and going for it anyway, right?
Yeah, and just seeing myself for who I was. And not being ashamed about it, or not kind of, stopping myself from thinking about the possibilities, or, not kind of being negative about what the opportunities could be, and just being more explorative and just thinking, well, maybe it's possible, you know, and just, well, I'll just give it a go. I'll just give it a go, and I'll just see, you know, what is the big risk? You know, what is the worst that could happen? You know, and what am I doing here? Not allowing my possibilities to happen. That's probably taking more energy and more internal stress than me just going for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? And what was the driving force? Because at the time, you're working in which company were you at?
So I was at Amazon.
You were at Amazon when you made that switch. What was the driving force behind making that switch? You know, what led you to decide to take on that risk?
I mean, there's actually a bit of a longer version of the story that I think I'm almost bored of telling it, to be honest. But I really think the universe was supporting me to start going on a different journey. So I've always had side hustles when I was working in corporate. So I was in corporate for 15 years, and, you know, my aspiration was to become, you know, the head of a large recruitment team in a huge company. And that's exactly where I got to. And so Incredible. I was the head of Europe, Middle East and Africa for Amazon and Amazon Web Services, the cloud computing business, for one of their recruiting teams. And so that was pretty much the dream. And I was like, this is the dream. Like I've hit the dream. This is amazing. And at the time I had, you know, a little side hustle doing sustainable fashion blogging with my sister. And then I had my own stationery business. And, you know, everybody knew that about me, that I was at some point in my life going to go and be an entrepreneur, but at the time didn't realize I probably just wasn't brave enough to do it. I also come from a family that is very entrepreneurial. So I was pretty much the first person in my family to really go down the corporate route.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
It's
so
normally the other way around. That's so interesting. Yeah.
Exactly. And my sister went down a semi-corporate route, but she's a creative director and fashion designer, so that can become very corporate, but she still had that real connection to her creative soul and her creative energy. And my mom was a performer, singer, dancer in South Africa. And then she became like a property mogul, and then she became an author, and then she kind of did all these different bits and pieces. And that created quite an up and down life for us, because being an entrepreneur, as you know, is not always very stable. So Absolutely. I think there was a part of me that was just like, oh, stable corporate career. This feels quite relaxing. But obviously after 15 years, I realized that it is just in my genetics to do something else, and I'm clearly longing to be my own boss and to pursue some of my passions. And so at the time I took a sabbatical from work, thinking, I just need a breather of 3 months and then I'll be fine. And I'd had a coach at the time who was coaching me, and she, you know, kept asking me, like, what do you want from the coaching? And I was like, I want you to coach me so that when I go back, I'm even stronger and better, and I'm going to be like pow, 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 and I'm going to create all these new teams, and I'm going to change the way we think about recruitment in the company. And she was like, hey, I can do that for you, but I don't think you're expanding what's possible for yourself. You know, I don't think that you're thinking outside of the box. You're just aiming to go back there. And I thought, well, that's kind of what I want to do. Like, yeah, maybe I'll have a side hustle, but that's the plan. So as time went on, I started pulling out lots of different skills that I had and desires and passions and things, and started meditating. And
so that was when you started meditating at that point?
I'd been meditating for a long time before that, on apps as well.
Right.
But that's when I started going down the route of what are the Vedic traditions,
Yes.
you know, what's the science, and started joining courses that were very in-depth. And then later on down the line carried on to become a teacher, but that wasn't the intention. And I was like, I need to just get deeper into this and understand it.
Yeah.
And then the universe conspired against me, and so I was supposed to go, well, for me actually, I was supposed to go back, and everything just went up in the air. And the organisation said, look, you know, we're not sure if you're going to have a role.
Wow.
And it was a very long legal process. So I had almost 6 months where I was pretty much on gardening leave, and there was opportunity to kind of stay or maybe go. And I just remember thinking at some point in that really time for myself, I just thought, why am I even trying to go back? Like, what am I doing here? You know, like, who am I? I started asking myself, who am I? Who am I? And part of the practice that I ended up becoming a certified teacher for is literally just asking yourself over and over again, who am I?
Right. Okay. Because I was going to say I'm not familiar with the traditions. I was going to ask that question.
Yeah. So it's a Sanskrit mantra-based practice. So you get given a mantra that is based on the time and place and day of your birth. There's some links to astrology and the positioning of the moon. it's the vibrational quality that the universe was making at the time and place of your birth. So it takes you back to your core before you had all the conditioning. And that was when I had the aha moment of, oh my gosh, like I'm not actually Katie, the corporate recruitment leader. I was like, that brings me pride from a sense of, oh, I work for Amazon, you know, and oh, I've got this big title, and oh, I'm earning loads of money or whatever. I was like, that's never really been me at the core. That's never been what I'm driven by, actually. The title, the money, all of this. That's not how people describe me as a child and, you know, when I was growing up. And it's not actually how people who meet me initially would describe me. It's that this bubble, this corporate bubble, and the people who know me in that see me as that.
Yes, I can't see it right now for sure.
No,
yeah.
I mean, I've always actually been like this. So imagine me in a corporate context. Right. I mean, everyone was like, "What are you doing?" And I did really well in it, right? You know, you find your way to kind of do it really well. But in my heart, I thought, no, there's got to be something else. So that's when I just really started opening up and being like, what did I enjoy as a child? You know, who am I? What is my purpose? And then started writing, started looking at what is it about the corporate space that actually puts me off, and then going down this journey of becoming a certified meditation teacher to be able to share this realization with others as well. Yeah,
amazing. And it can be sometimes a scary moment, right, when you almost have that like clearing of consciousness where you go past the ego in some ways of you know what we've built around us, and you're like, oh wait, hold on, there's so much more to this. And I know I've had really strange moments where you almost have, especially in transcendental practice, where you have those moments where you're just, actually, am I even in my body right now? Am I actually with my ego anymore? And they're amazing moments though, and I think, but it's amazing that you have taken that and, you know, gone so far with it now and run so far with it. How, because I know a lot of people listening to this will be either in corporate thinking about transitioning out or just made that jump. How did you feel after taking that risk, and what did that journey look like for you? And was it a quick one? Did you feel you had everything you needed, or difficult learning journey?
It's such a funny thing. Like, I'm still quite hard on myself in terms of, thinking, I always think I should have done more and that I should be going further. That's something that hopefully more meditation will support me with, just being comfortable with, how things are going right now. When I talk about what I'm doing to other people or with other people, I realize that actually it has been quite quick in terms of me getting to where I am now. So funnily enough, the transition, I think, wasn't as hard for me as other people, just simply because, like I said, I have an entrepreneurial family. Yes. So I didn't have the pressure of my parents in particular saying, why are you leaving a secure job? They couldn't say that because they both, my dad's a farmer in Swaziland, right? So, for him, it was kind of like, what are you doing in the corporate space? Yeah. So when I was moving out of it, there was actually support from my family, like, oh, this is amazing. Give it a go. Take the risk. They're quite risky, why not try, and especially for my mum, who's quite spiritually connected, she was like, oh, I knew this was going to happen. You were a spiritual being. Like, this was always going to be your journey. I'm so proud of you, So actually I had a lot of support to be able to make that move. I didn't feel the pressure. And if anything, it was maybe colleagues of mine or people I'd worked with before who were like, why would you were like on the precipice of becoming a global leader of blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I've just realized that I don't want that. Yeah. So actually that's fine with me not to continue and do that. So that was actually quite easy and comfortable. What was really hard was knowing how to be an entrepreneur, the kind of the tools and the support and the mechanisms of actually doing it. Things like getting an accountant and making sure your taxes are okay and registering a company and, suddenly you'll be talking to corporates and they're like, are you VAT registered? And you're like, I'm like, no, I'm just coming to chat to you about empathy. And they're like, no, you need to be a company.
Real lack of empathy in that conversation. Yeah, exactly. They're asking about VAT registration.
I know. I was like, what is it? Why am I doing it? So that the technical side of things of having a business was really quite challenging for me. I'm semi-operational in terms of my skill set. I'm definitely more of a visionary in terms of doing things and, aspiring to do things. So understanding where I needed to ask for help and where I could do things myself was super important. So I'm quite an independent soul. So I was like, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll set up my bank account, and then I was just like, I'm gonna get chased by, you know, HMRC in a second. Is my business bank account actually working? Is it, can I just take the salary out? What, you know, all these intricacies. So I was like, okay, cool. I have to just understand that I need some help.
Yeah.
I need to get an accountant. You know, we need to get a special payroll system. I need to have, specific invoicing processes. I need to make sure that I'm sending out really kind of professional proposals and stuff like this. So that bit was, a little bit trickier for me. I would say that the technicalities were a little bit hard. The other thing was how much you really have to market yourself. So I wasn't used to that, because when you're in an organization, you just get on with it and your salary comes at the end of the month and you haven't had to necessarily promote your services.
Especially a brand like Amazon, right? Everyone's heard of you. There's no knocking down barriers on that side. Yeah.
Literally don't need to do anything for like 1,000 people to apply for a job, and you're just like, okay, cool, this is the other way around now. And being a new person in the industry you're going into, you know, I've got this wonderful corporate experience, but, you know, I'm not a meditation teacher who's done it for 20 years. You know, I'm not a workshop facilitator who's facilitated workshops for 10 years. You know, I've actually done a lot internally at corporate, but this is me rebranding. This is me allowing people to see me as the expert I want to be before I'm necessarily the expert, right?
Yeah.
So that took me kind of going to somebody who could help me with branding, just literally in terms of what are your brand colors, what are your fonts, what are your values. And once I had that core, just the colors, fonts, values, from there, I felt like a superhero.
Yes. And how much do you think getting past those mental barriers is key to that? Because I've met amazing entrepreneurs who are brilliant technicians, they're brilliant at this, brilliant at that. The thing that I see as the thing which ultimately holds them back is their inability to get over that thing in their head which says, I'm not the expert yet, therefore how can I present to be that expert? You know, it's an imposter syndrome, however you want to call it. But I guess, does that come more from the entrepreneurial spirit in your family? Does that come more from controlling thoughts and meditation? How did you arrive at getting over that barrier a lot of people face?
Well, you know, I think it's a bit of a combination of that entrepreneurial spirit. I had this confidence that, well, I come from an entrepreneurial background, so I've been by osmosis just absorbing how to run a business, right? And, you know, I don't know if that's true or not, but
I think
that gave me confidence. Yeah, and it probably is true to a certain extent, but I think the key thing is that I felt confidence in that idea of being absorbing that. The meditation 100% really, really helped me, because it helped me to actually help me to build confidence, which is one thing. I'm actually generally a little, you know, quite confident, but everyone has their moments. But I think what it really helped me with was actually identifying skills that I wouldn't have called skills before. So identifying some of the things that are actually really easy for me to do. And sometimes when your things are easy, you don't think people should pay you for them. So, you know, I would be like, oh, it's actually really easy for me to sit down with someone and guide them through a meditation. I had, you know, there's so many students on my course who really found that difficult. And I thought, this is really easy. You know, it's like having a conversation with someone and supporting their mental mindset and, you know, empowering them. People shouldn't be paying me for this because it feels like fun, you know?
Wow.
Yeah. And I thought, well, no, that's my skill set.
That's incredible.
That's my skill set, you know? So I was like, oh, I see it now. I see that as my skill set, right? So I think that's important as well, is that we have actually a lot of expertise that we don't label expertise, but when you look at it for what it is, it's expertise. And you don't have to have done it for 10 years. So I was like, okay, cool. Someone else has tried to do this for 10 years and hasn't been as good. This is my thing.
I'm learning so much today, I can't tell you. Like, I've never thought about it that way. And I think that is such a core part of the imposter syndrome, is that, no, this isn't that difficult. And therefore, if people find out it's not difficult, then I'll be exposed. But it's just a skill set, right? That's such a great way of looking at it. I love that. Okay, I want to offer you two options here. We could go back down the more spiritual route and maybe a bit more abstract, or we can go into some questions that I ask every guest who comes on the show.
Let's do some for every guest. It would be nice for people to feel some consistency.
Okay, amazing. All right. So my first question that I want to ask you is, what's the single biggest risk you've ever taken, and what was the outcome?
it's leaving my corporate career, definitely. That was a huge risk for me. At the time, we were living in South Africa, actually, my husband and I, and we were kind of like, we're not sure we want to stay there forever. I've got family there, so I'm a mix of South African and British, and lots of other things. I've done my kind of analysis, and I've got 17 gene pools. So, but it's simpler to say I'm South African and British. But it didn't feel like home necessarily there, and he's not South African, and so he wasn't enjoying his job at the time. He was also at Amazon, actually. That's not how we met, but he was also there, and we just started feeling like a little bit up in the air with what the future looked like. So it wasn't really the best time for me to be leaving something that was secure. But the timing is just never right, and in South Africa, actually, people are a lot more spiritually connected, a lot more in touch with nature, and a lot in touch with themselves, partly because they have to be because of a lack of opportunity. So you're forced to really look at yourself and explore what you can do. People also have to be a lot more entrepreneurial because they have to survive. So you have to figure out how you're going to sell, sweets on the corner of the street to be able to feed your kids. And this entrepreneurial spirit is actually part of the culture.
Oh, wow.
So it's not necessarily that strange for somebody to take a leap and do something risky, because it's part of the DNA almost. For South Africans in general. That's a very generalization, but for a large part of the population. So it was a risky thing, and I was also in a country where I have the passport, but nobody sees me as South African. It's the same here in the UK, but I thought I would feel more at home there, but it really didn't. I felt actually more of an outsider. So there'll be much harder for me to actually find a new job and to understand the environment there and the opportunities. So I knew that if I stopped my corporate career there, that may literally be it. Whereas if I was in the UK, I've got a huge network in Europe of people who would snap me up in a second, but didn't have it there. So I was like, this is actually a big risk, and we're not sure if we're going to move back to the UK. So this is it. I could not have a job for a long time if I'm making this decision. The other really big risk was that, if it doesn't work out, I try not to think about if it doesn't work out, but, at that point you're a bit like, if it doesn't work out and you've been out of work for 6 months, 12 months, you become less desirable and nobody will hire you then.
It's a vicious cycle, right?
It's a vicious cycle. And I know in my mind, and I was like, I have to be real about this. I'm changing my career. At the time it felt like completely, but actually there's still a bit of a connection. Drastically. It's going to take a minimum of 12 months for it to be something. So
it's past the point of no return.
Past the point of no return. So I was like, okay, it's not like after 6 months it's going to be, boom, boom, boom. I have to understand that this is going to take a while. So that was the biggest risk. Definitely was changing that path. And when I think about it now, the actual biggest risk was like not having money.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing that you get so scared about.
Yes. It's the trick the world plays on you, right?
It's the trick the world plays on you. And it was like this weird thing where I was so worried I wouldn't have money. And I have had moments in my life where we actually haven't had money in my family. So there's a real connection to what it feels like not to have anything. So I know what it feels like. So I was extra scared of it. Whereas my husband has never really experienced that. So he's a bit more chilled about it. He's quit his job multiple times and to find new careers, and he's more comfortable. Whereas I'm like, but we could end up on the street, So that conditioning within me was really real. And so I left scared with that feeling, and I survived for 2 years on just building the business. This with my savings and, having been careful, but also still enjoying life a bit. But that's when I realized that it was a false fear at the time that I was having it, because I had savings, and I had skill sets and I had opportunity, and I was still so scared. So almost like the less money I had, the less scared I was.
Yeah, 100%.
It was crazy. I was like, why am I so relaxed? And you just start to kind of trust in the process and relax into it and believe that it's going to happen. And, and things are actually picking up loads now. So it is that patience. But that was the biggest risk I took, and the most scared I ever felt, but was actually the point in technically I shouldn't have been scared.
It's such an interesting answer, and again, something I've heard from other people, something I've experienced myself, is that you know, when you have had those moments, and my dad was an entrepreneur of varying levels of success at varying times. My mum was a primary school teacher who unfortunately got very ill when I was young. And there was, you know, times where we had zero money because my dad had flopped a project, you know, not through lack of trying or whatever. It just, you know, it goes like that sometimes. Yeah. And I had that complex so much where I was like, oh, if I don't succeed in what I do, I will have nothing. And it's just that horrible grab that. And I remember one of the most important moments of my life, and I wonder how you felt when you had this, the first time, and this was when I was just trying to build my first business and way before we ever made money on it, but I was able to monetize my time helping a different company out just for like a 1 month thing. And I was like, that was one of the most important moments of my life, because it was like, okay, I have a skill set that I can make money on. Everything's going to be okay. Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. And maybe, and part of it is that feeling that someone recognizes your skill set, that gives you the confidence to do it. Because you're like, oh, okay, somebody else sees what I'm able to do, and that means I can do it, you know? Yeah. Which is great, actually. Is a really good part to go through. And I think I've tried very hard not to partner too much with other companies, and the main, and I have done a little bit recently actually with one individual who was very inspiring and who I've done kind of a program with. But the main reason is just because the kind of work I do is very hard to put into a box. So I don't want to be dragged into maybe a stereotypical type of work, because I'm trying to do something that's very different and unique. And there is nobody out there at the moment who I'm aware of and who is, you know, within this region or whatever to partner with, who replicates what I'm trying to do. So that has stopped me from doing too many kind of collaborations and stuff like that. Whereas obviously I'll go and support organizations with their empathy and their meditation. It comes from a very kind of human perspective. Obviously being human well is what I'm all about. But there is that sense of when you're starting a business, you've probably had it before, where you're just trying to keep it as close to your values and as close to your dream, and not letting other companies or other people kind of toxify it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Like while you're trying to build what it is, right?
100%. Okay, my next question for you is there anything on your journey that you wish you did differently?
Gosh, you feel like so good about how it's like gone and how it
great.
feels. Yeah, I really do. You know, one thing that I might have done differently, and this is maybe more of a personal thing than a work thing, but you know, obviously as I started going more into kind of the meditation and really exploring what I wanted to do, is that there have been maybe a few tiny moments where when your consciousness starts shifting and raising and expanding or whatever, that you kind of wish people around you went on that journey with you. And so you almost have a feeling of, can't you see like what you could do? Can't you see what your possibilities could be? And you almost get a bit frustrated because you discovered something that has supported you and your growth, that you want it so badly for everyone else that you almost impose it a little bit on them, especially the people who are close to you. So I think that maybe at points I've been a bit like, why can't my loved ones see this? You know, like, why can't they do this? Yeah. That everybody is on their own journey, and actually just that is part of the meditation practice, is actually just letting people be who they are. And obviously part of the empathy journey is understanding that other people have their own path and their own journey. So I've never really done that super strongly, and I'm not sure if anybody would say that they necessarily felt that I had. Sure, yeah. But there are definitely parts of me where I've been sitting there looking over the room and thinking, oh, if only you could see what your potential is, you know, and it frustrated me. Yeah. But they will in their own time, and you know, with their own methods.
And it's good intention, right? At the end of the day, you know, it's coming from a place of wanting to be a rising tide to lift all boats, you know.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
But you know, it's great intention, right? And that's one of the things that I've personally been going a bit more deeper into recently is, you know, metta practice, where just, you know, hoping for the best for everyone that I know, and just, you know, really focusing on that and giving time and attention to that, and knowing that everyone's on their own journey, and will hopefully come to it at different times. But for sure, you know, especially after a few drinks, I'm definitely going to try and inspire everyone to go down this journey. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, my next question for you is, what does it take to be successful?
Well, it's different for everyone, I think. Yeah, I think it's different for everyone. You know, I mean, I personally think it's awareness. It's awareness of the possibility. Like we were saying earlier, it's not necessarily that you are the expert in something. It's awareness of those skills that you have and being able to draw those out and use them, and an awareness of what you're good at and being able to go full force in that direction. I think when we're at school, we kind of do all these different subjects, and the ideal scenario is you get an A in all of them. But we're just not built to be good at all of them. And then when you go into work, the idea is that you can be good at every element of your job. And so you have your performance review, and there are bits that you're not so good at. And then people say, work on those bits to try and balance it out, right? But I'm a big believer now in, what are your superpowers? What are the things that you find easy? What are the things that bring you joy and ease? And focus on those and go full force there. So I think that we would probably have a lot more entrepreneurs if we had the opportunity, and if we gave, children, but even adults, the chance to actually identify what are the things that are easy, what are the things that bring you joy, and then double down on those, right? Versus spend your whole life trying to become better at something you're not wired to do. I just think, what have we done to the world? Yeah, and we're not supposed to be good at everything, right? It's not possible. And we're supposed to look to other people for support and community and expertise, right? So I would say that's probably the kind of secret source of success, is figuring out what is the thing that you're naturally good at, or that brings you bliss and joy. And then that's probably your entrepreneurial journey, or the job you're supposed to be doing.
Love that. I think that's an amazing answer. And how much then is it important that people, I find sometimes actually within entrepreneurial community, sometimes it's the most difficult. And I see the same with actors and comedians and people in entertainment. It's the same thing where it's like the odds are really difficult. You have to deal with loads of rejection. You have to keep on going. You have to have that perseverance. It's where opportunity is maybe, far more stacked against you than towards you, for example. How important is it to be hyper realistic in those situations and say, well, actually, do you know what? I'm better at this than that, even if you feel like that's your passion. That's where it can get difficult at times, right?
You have to be realistic. Like you have to be realistic. And it's that awareness of, is this something that is actually going to, does it bring you joy if you're consistently getting rejections? Is it your passion if you're consistently getting rejections? Maybe not. So you have to have that reality check every now and then, and to take that opportunity to try something else. And then you might be like, oh, this is actually more joyful, or this is actually making me happier. So that awareness is absolutely key. I feel like for myself, like right now I will say, this I love, I'm loving this, but I don't know if I will in 6 months, 12 months. It's important to check in.
Yeah.
Is it working? What are the finances looking like? What is the feedback from everybody else? That regular check-in will help you to realize, because you could find yourself after, I did 15 years in corporate, right? So you can find yourself many years down the line thinking, without knowing that 15 years have gone by. And you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't check in on myself, whether I actually still enjoy this. I absolutely enjoyed many years of that time, but not 15 years of it. So the actor or, the comedian who's trying to go down this path should probably check in more regularly about whether this is the right thing for them to be doing, and then explore other things. And there's no shame in what people might perceive as failure, right?
Yeah,
it's not. It's an exploration. I mean, I have done so many wacky things. Like I remember once I had this company called London Cupcake Tours.
Okay, nice. Sounds great.
Oh, delicious. I'm a big cake fan. And, it was probably like 10 years ago, but you would have this little pack that people would buy, and it would have a map, and then they would go to all the cupcake stores in London. They have a voucher in there in a box, and they would like basically fill their box with cupcakes.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds so much fun, but what a terrible business. I mean, the cupcake shops were closing and moving, and the vouchers would expire, and all of this, and I had to at some point just be like, what? What is this? What is it? I like cake, but maybe that shouldn't be my business.
Yeah. It's
right.
It's fascinating, and you're right, that's it. Like I see so many people putting themselves through suffering because they feel like the world or society feels that they should be this, or have an expectation on them for this, but ultimately that's it. We have one life, of an undetermined length of time, You know, it's got to be our responsibility to check in with ourselves and say, well, actually, am I enjoying this? Because who knows how long the ride is, right?
Yeah. And the struggle is not the glory. I think there's also a kind of attachment to this, you know, if I'm persistent enough and, you know, if I keep going and if I'm going to like, if I live in like poverty or whatever, that, you know, in order to see the blossoming of the wonder of what I'm supposed to do, I should have to struggle first.
Yes, the idea of the starving artist, right?
Yes, exactly. And you know, and you can even apply that to like a banker, for example, this idea of like, well, if I work the long hours and, you know, make the money and everything, then I'm going to be like the banker who did it or whatever. You know, I survived it. It's such a wonderful, you know, there's so much of our lives that are built around this idea of it's got to be hard for us to get the gift at the end or something. And I actually really believe, and I hope it's the same for everybody, but I really believe that it's the ease and the simplicity and the joy of life that is the success, not the struggle to get that. And of course I have to work hard sometimes and work extra hours to make my business work, but I'm very good at balancing having the holidays and not going into the evenings too much and, you know, saying no to things and doing the socials and, you know, making sure I get to the sound bath or whatever it is, because it's the balance that is the joy, right? It doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be a struggle. The universe will provide. And when they say the universe will provide, it doesn't mean you're going to be a millionaire with an 8-bedroom house.
Of course.
It might not be what you want or what you need, and it probably won't bring you joy.
Yes.
It will provide joy and bliss, right? And security, just enough security for you to be whatever. And when you're feeling relaxed and secure, then that's probably when the money will start coming in if you want it and if the universe provides it. But it's not that's, you've got to think about what you're actually trying to attain here.
Yes. It's why purpose is so important, because then it's like you said, are you enjoying it? When you find that purpose, then actually you find that making sacrifices, whatever you call it, but when you're genuinely enjoying that purpose and feel like you found your calling in that way, it becomes much easier to commit as well, I think.
Yeah. And knowing that it's a journey, that your purpose will shift and evolve and change, maybe, you know.
Yes.
Being open to that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always a scary thing to have that realization that, well, actually, I'm going to go all in on this right now. This is how I feel right now, but it may change. And it's a scary concept to a lot of people, right? A lot of what we've built our modern day society around, at least traditionally, is you're with one person for your whole life, you're in one job for your whole life. Like everything was all about, okay, this is the fixed plan. That's obviously totally unnatural in many ways. Okay, my last question for you is, 15-year-old Katie walks in the room right now. What are you going to tell her?
Oh, do you know what I'd probably tell her? So, I write a lot of poetry. I do a lot of writing in general, but poetry I started when I was a kid and when I was really first able to write. And at that time was probably when I thought I was writing a lot of poetry, kind of expressing my feelings and putting it down on paper. And my family had gone through a lot of changes and parents separating and moving countries, and a lot of kind of turmoil at that time. And poetry was something I did very naturally to put my emotions down on paper and my experience down on paper. So if you read my poetry, there's hundreds and hundreds of poems. You could map how I felt probably every month or so, you know, that this is how Katie felt and what she was doing or what was in the news or what was happening in the world. But I had no idea at that point that could ever be part of my adult life or my adult skill set, or even see it as a skill set or see it as a passion. It was, I don't know why, I don't know how I just loved paper, and that's obviously why I have a stationery business still, but I had no idea at that point that could be something for me to focus on and be proud of and expand on. And then obviously life happens at around that age. You start kind of thinking you're an adult, and then you start, your conditioning gets even more and more severe. And so I moved away from writing for quite a long time after that, and I've come full circle now to do the writing. And I've kind of, you know, probably between 15 and maybe 5 years ago, wrote maybe a couple of poems a year, but had so much more in me that I didn't do. So part of me thinks, gosh, if I had recognized that at 15 years old, if I had paid more attention to it, and, you know, if society had actually rewarded the arts more,
sure, yeah,
then I could have started my writing journey much earlier. And, you know, and I don't regret that, but it's just something that little 15-year-old Katie probably would have liked to know. Yeah, that's a skill.
Amazing. That's a really nice one. I think, most people, when we ask them that question, it's just telling them the words that they'd wish they known at that time. And I think when it comes to the advice that most people give, it's often to do with being creative.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And just, nurturing, skills that were maybe there. And it's just, it's a really interesting one because I think, although people are now in a place where for the most part they're happy, they love what they do, and they wouldn't change things at all. It's just interesting that people seem to always go back to the idea of creating, and that it's something people wish they did more.
Yeah, I can see why. Yeah.
Katie, what would you like to plug?
Oh, okay. Well, I am here for anybody who wants to learn more about meditation. I have a number of online courses, but also workshops I run in person. A big part of me being still in contact with the corporate world is that I have a very strong belief that workplaces can be more human. Mm-hmm. So I'm plugging the gap that I feel I would have loved to plug when I was there internally, but it's easier to do it when you're external, is to bring the humanness back into corporates. And that is through cultivating the recognition of how empathy is good for business, but also good for humans and retention and engagement and all of that. And that the most wonderful tool to kind of grow into a more empathetic human being is meditation. So if you want a bit of that in your corporates, if you want a bit of raising your self-awareness and consciousness, I would absolutely love to help you.
I love that. And where can people find you?
So my website is beinghumanwell.com. You can find me on Instagram at beinghumanwell. So very simple. And if you want to email me, it's katie@beinghumanwell.com. So yeah.
Amazing. Katie, thank you so much.
Thank you, Roei. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching the episode. And if you haven't subscribed, please hit subscribe below so that you can support the podcast and we can keep on bringing you amazing new guests. If you want to see the other amazing episodes in this podcast, click into our series section. As ever, if there are any other guests or topics you want us to explore, just let me know in the comments and we'll do our best to bring someone in.